What do you make of this potential for Nvidia, at least, and whether or not China will indeed import? The market reaction from your perspective?
Well, this is a win for Nvidia, but it has to be taken with a pinch of salt, because we already hear that there are tensions among US politicians regarding what this means for the national security for US. It is a very sensitive segment of business. China is unsure to let its own companies buy these chips for the same national security issues, and also because they're backing the domestic chip production. So for Nvidia, which assumes that its China sales are now zero, every chip that's going to be sold to China is a bonus. It is a tailwind. But for long-term forecasts, we still remain very much cautious regarding what this means and how stable the steel is going to be.
Ipek, the base case assumption from Nvidia is right now in the fiscal year, and maybe next fiscal year, zero revenues from China. But clearly this news has led everyone to recalculate. Would you assume some upside from Chinese AI data center chip revenue next year?
Well, again, the geopolitical backdrop is so uncertain that the best thing to do in terms of the safest way to go with these assumptions is to keep that forecast at 0%. But obviously, investors are happy to hear that there is an opportunity in China for Nvidia. But again, that opportunity is very much uncertain right now. We don't know if China is going to allow these chips to be sold. And again, we don't even know if the Chinese companies will be willing to buy these chips, given that it is politically very sensitive, and if they could use domestic alternatives, even though they're less efficient, maybe it's going to be a better deal for them, especially from a political and geopolitical perspective. So in my opinion, investors will continue to assume that the Chinese sales the Nvidia's Chinese sales are going to be zero, with a little bonus maybe if some of these chips actually get sold.
Ipek, bring us your global perspective as you sit in Switzerland. This tussle between US and China to say who's got more dominance. But what do you hear from your perspective as to how far along China really is with its domestic chip manufacturing and use?
Well, obviously, US and US technology is ahead of China. What China is good at doing is basically to find the chips to manufacture chips in order to serve their own needs and serve the basic AI needs. So China is generally better in transforming their AI investments into real revenue, whereas the US is this prestige technology hub that's really aiming for the best. But even from the European perspective, where we could be a little bit more neutral, well, US is allies, first of all, and US is well ahead from a technology perspective than China. Then China is clearly coming, and the fact that these chip restrictions have hit the Chinese technology sector means that they will be accelerating their efforts and do anything in their power to catch the US technology.
It really has been a mounting concern from some of these tech leaders that perhaps we're underestimating how sophisticated China is. Is the market underestimating how superior TPUs are, how other chips are being manufactured by big tech players for their own inference? How much do we need to bake that into the Nvidia story?
Well, I think that TPUs are interesting, but they are actually, serving in one particular area, and that's AI. Obviously, the fact that Google is now out there and commercializing the TPUs is a negative risk, is a negative factor for Nvidia. It is a risk in the sense that for those companies who are looking only for their AI applications, they would find it cheaper and as efficient as buying Nvidia's GPUs. But at the end of the day, Nvidia is not only selling chips, they're also selling the ecosystem that comes with it. So not every company is going to be comfortable going into the TPUs just because it's cheaper and is as efficient. I think that Nvidia still has the GPU market and the ecosystem well anchored, and Google, for example, with its TPUs doesn't really have it.